What's up, everybody? The wait is finally over and totally over. Left at Wall is available now, right now. You can get Left at Wall on Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube Movies. You can get it on demand. You can buy it on DVD. The wait is totally over. Just type in Left at Wall on your search bar on your smart TV, and you can find a bunch of ways to get it. You can watch it now. Again, that's Left at Wall, wherever you get your movies. Episode 79, Alonzo Bodden. Alonzo Bodden is a comedian and actor. He won Last Comic Standing, Season 3. He's a regular on the NPR show Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me, and that's barely touching his resume. I've known Alonzo for a long time and have always loved crossing paths with him. I get to know a bit more about the man behind the content in this episode, though we definitely dive into the weeds of the current state of affairs. Tough not to. Please welcome to the show, Alonzo Bodden. Alonzo Bodden, good to see you, man. It's been a long time.
What's up, Ron? How are you?
I'm good, buddy. How you been?
I'm good. I've moved to Vegas since last we talked. I live in Las Vegas now.
I did not know that. Okay, interesting. Yeah. It's as I was prepping for this, I realized you're one of those comics where not a lot is known about the guy behind the work, and those are some of my favorite interviews to do. Really. So I'm actually curious. Where are you from? Where did you grow up?
So I grew up in New York. I grew up in Queens. Actually, to be specific, St. Albans. It wasn't the hood until 50 Cent mentioned it. And then apparently property values dropped and things, working class black neighborhood in Queens. It was very cool growing up there. And I went to school. I went to aviation high school. So I learned aircraft and got hired by Lockheed and moved to Burbank. So my move to LA had nothing to do with show business, but that's what got me out to LA.
So when did you get into comedy?
Let's see. I started doing stand-up in 93. I was training new airplane mechanics, and I just found I had more fun making them laugh. I could always be funny, but I'd never been in front of people. And when I started teaching, you stand up in front of a room, a situation which makes most people nervous. For me, it was the most natural thing in the world. It was super comfortable. So you put those two things together and, you get a stand-up comic. So
this is kind of my own ignorance of the field. Like, are you an actual pilot? Like, or was that?
No, I was a mechanic. I mostly built, but also repaired aircraft. But I spent most of my time at the factories building them. I like building better than fixing because it's cleaner. Literally, that was the only reason. If you think your car gets dirty on the road, an airplane after flying is a filthy, like the first part of your job as a mechanic is cleaning it off to see what you have to work on.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I can only imagine because it's literally in the sky.
Yeah, it's exposed to all elements. But I mean, it was cool. It was a fun job. It was a fun career. I liked it, but when I left, I was done. Like, I never looked back. I don't say, man, if only I could still fix airplanes. Matter of fact, I just did a corporate gig for Northrop Aircraft where a few of my friends worked. And I was talking to one of them who's about to retire and looking around and thinking, wow, could I have done this for 40 years? No.
So, I mean, as a touring comic now, though, do you feel a little bit of peace of mind that you have those skills? I mean, looking at what's going on recently, like, do you board a plane? You're like, I'm glad I'm here.
Back in my day, we didn't have pieces flying off in midair, and they tended to land on the wheels. That was how we did it. They were kind of designed to do that. But I have had experiences with people who had a fear of flying. My friend Pete, why am I forgetting Pete's last name? He's a New York comic. Anyway, he had a big fear of flying. And I explained to him how planes fly, how planes are built and everything else. And he was like, wow, man, I really feel better knowing, because, I tell everyone, Ron, airplanes are built so much better than anything in your life, like better than your car, better than your house, better than, anything, redundant systems, etc. So I have no fear of flying, but my knowledge in no way helps as a passenger.
Right. Even in the case of an emergency evacuation, there's not much you're doing in the air.
No, I know how the door blows off, but they probably wouldn't want me doing it. We really frown. For anyone watching or listening to this podcast, they really frown on you blowing the doors off the aircraft. They'd rather do it themselves. So just don't.
Well, you had a pretty decent career in the aviation field. So what was the moment where you decided, I'm walking away from all of this, I'm doing show business?
I got laid off. Right. So what happened in aerospace, especially back then in the 80s and 90s, a lot of layoffs, it was military, right? So Lockheed gets a contract to build X number of planes. They finish, they lay off the workers, McDonnell Douglas, blah, blah, blah. So I was working at McDonnell training new people, and then they didn't need any more new people. So they didn't need anyone to train new people. So I got laid off right when I started comedy, and I just made a deal with myself to not work on airplanes anymore. I wasn't going to look for another aircraft job because it would have been too easy to make money. It would have been, I needed to chase comedy. So that's what I did.
And this would have been in LA then.
Yeah, this is in LA in 93. I started stand up in LA because I didn't know I wasn't supposed to. Found out later in my career, I was supposed to start in some small city and work my way up and start over in LA. And I skipped that part and just started in LA.
Do you think that worked out for the best? Like, do you think it was better that way?
You know why it's great? You know why it's great to start in LA or New York? Because you're around the best, right? You're around the people who work to get to that point. So it's kind of like you're learning from and working with the best talent, which made me better. So yeah, I'm glad I did it.
So when did you start incorporating politics into what you do, or has it always been that way?
I'm going to say I became a lot more topical after I did Last Comic Standing. When I was doing Last Comic, doing that show requires tons of material. And I like to write. I mean, that's, one of the things that helps me. I like writing material. So I just found myself writing material and doing it on the show. And it was really fun, man. I felt like I was some kind of, late night host or something, right? Because I'm doing jokes about things that just happened this week. And I really liked it. So the world, in my opinion, the world became funnier than me. This was at a time of what we had George Bush, we had Schwarzenegger, we had Paris Hilton, things like that were going on. Remember the good old days when we thought W was the worst president we could ever have?
Oh, boy.
Wasn't that fun?
Oh, geez.
So
yeah.
I just started talking about that and doing that material. And it was more fun to me because it was always new, right? It was always fresh, bang, bang, bang. And topical political stuff, societal stuff is fun. And now I'm getting to the point where I'm tired of doing it because we as a society aren't moving forward. We're moving backwards. So it's like, how many times can we make the same joke? How many times can we, I guess the question is, how many times can we make the same mistake?
Yeah. I mean, I was going to ask you to weigh in on that. Like, just what's your feelings of the state of affairs now and just how everything's going? So.
Well, so I'm not surprised. I mean, Donald Trump is exactly who he said he is. He's doing exactly what he said was going to do. The funniest thing is the people that are surprised. And it's like, what part of his campaign made you think, well, he's not going to be racist? And what part of his history and business said, he's a really smart man. He knows what he's doing. So you knew what you were getting, and now they're getting it. And, I'm sorry, but every time one of these Trump people, whether it be the veterans for Trump, the Latinos for Trump, the blacks for Trump, whatever, loses their job, or they're going to lose the farm because they didn't know that the United States government bought the contract that bought the lettuce they're growing. Oh, wait a minute. There's no one to pick the lettuce they're growing. Never mind. So, it's sad. It's going to be a tough time to get through. I think we will survive it. But this cycle gets old, right? Where it's like, okay, let's put the crazy Republican in, blow everything up. Then a Democrat comes in, has to clean up the mess. And then they're like, wait a minute, things aren't great again. I want the it's the cycle. More surprising and worse. I'm disappointed by the media. They're the ones, the fourth estate is the one that's supposed to put a stop to this, right? They're the ones who are supposed to be watching this, and they're totally complicit because they like the clicks and the crazy stories. And then people come to the comics and they say, oh, well, you guys are the only one telling the truth. And it's like, yeah, that's been our job since the court jester. We speak truth to power and we make fun of idiots. So, but we're not happy. Like, oh, you must have a ton of material. Like, no, I'd rather my country not fall apart just so I can write jokes about my country falling apart. So I'll be in Canada, and I'm wishing you luck, Ron. I know people up north, and they'll accept me.
All right. Well, yeah, no, I hear you there. I mean, it's one of those things. The system gives you plenty to make fun of. We don't need a straight up fascist regime. There's enough to make fun of without that.
Yeah, it's. I don't know. I mean, any cliche about fooling the people is being proven true, and. When it comes to comedians, my favorite quote, and I'm not sure who to attribute this to because I've heard different names, but the quote is that if you're going to tell people the truth, make them laugh or they'll kill you. Which,
I forget who that started with too, but yeah, it's a famous one.
Yeah, and that's what we do, right?
So when did you kind of start? Because I know you're like one of the most popular panelists on Wait, Don't Tell Me, and give me the origin story there.
You flatter me. I wish I was still one of the most popular, but I'm not doing the show as often. There's a whole wave of new panelists, and I don't say that with any malice. You know what I mean? Like good luck to them and this and that. I still love doing the show. What happened? This is one of those. I'm probably lucky in my ignorance. When I was first asked to do Wait, Don't Tell Me, I'd never heard of Wait, Don't Tell Me. I'd never listened to it. I had no idea. And my agent was like, it's a news panel show. You got to, they'll talk about the news. You tell some jokes. And I'm like, I can do that. And then I got there and all I thought was, I only have to be funnier than Tom Bodden. Because he was on my first show I did. And again, no disrespect to Tom Bodden, but I'm a stand-up. I'm touring. I'm working all the time. I'm like, I got this. And it worked. And they liked what I did. They liked what I had to say and the way I had to say it. And they just kept bringing me back. And it wasn't until, I guess, it was during my first year, but it was when Carl Castle, the original announcer, retired. And they said, do you want to go to the retirement party? And I'm thinking like, no, why would I want to go? I don't know this guy, I knew who he was, but I'm not going. Then the next time I'm on the show, they're like, oh man, the retirement party was great. Yeah. Tom Hanks was there and Katie Couric was there and they got a message sent in from Obama. And I'm sitting there like, what the hell is this show? Who are you? And that's when I found out how big a show it was. But I love doing Wait.
Mm-hmm. So, well, how did that?
Another fun fact I think I've been doing it for 12 years now. I've never been a guest host.
Oh, really?
I'm probably the only panelist who's never been a guest host. There are panelists who've done the show 3 weeks who were a guest host on their second week, and I've still never been a guest host.
Oh, okay.
Don't know what that's about.
I mean, I admittedly don't. It's not a show I regularly listen to. I mean, it's every time I've caught it, it's made me laugh. But yeah, I just knew you were one of the regulars there.
No, it's a great show, and I love doing it. They just they brought in they rotate in new panelists, and I'm not even sure how that works. Nobody really knows what the formula is for who's on and when they're on. But whenever they call, I'm ready to go.
So getting back to just sort of the state of affairs, like when you kind of look at this through the lens of just history, do you feel like there's been an erosion that's gotten us to this point?
Well, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things I think involved here. I think if you look at it from a historical perspective, it's very interesting how we're 100 years ago. If you look back 100 years to the era of the robber barons, that's who the billionaires are. I
Hmm.
do a bit about, remember the good old days when you didn't know who billionaires were? They were quiet and they kept to themselves. They were horrible people then, but at least they didn't bother us. These are the robber barons of the early 1900s that led to the forming of unions and the labor movement, et cetera, et cetera. Unfortunately, they also led to World Wars One and Two. But if you look at it, it's the same thing. Now, my parents passed away, and there's a part of me that is glad that they are not alive to see all the civil rights stuff that they fought for in the 60s completely being unraveled, and the Republicans unravel it using the same language. Oh, well, we don't want to look at skin color. It's like, well, you don't want to look at skin color because it's white. It's whatever they say, the opposite is true, right? But it works. And, this DEI thing, the truth behind anything that's publicized, and this is where I get to the media being so full of shit, right? So look at any quote DEI hire and look how more qualified they were than the person who didn't get hired. You take the Supreme Court, look at Justice Ketanji Brown's, look at her resume and compare it to Amy Bernard. Amy, whatever her Amy, I call her the handmaid, but you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You compare her resume to the handmaid or the drunk. It's not even close. How many more cases she had to do? How much more studying she had to do? Her experience in case law. You look at Barack Obama and Donald Trump. Like, look at Barack Obama's education. Look at his background versus I was born rich. That's Trump's qualification. I was born rich and I didn't lose all of the money my dad gave me. That's his best business thing. He could say, I didn't lose all the money my dad gave me, most of it, but not all of it. So from a historical perspective, the only good thing I can say is if you look at history, the good side always won. The liberals always won, whether it be ending slavery, women's right to vote, more recently, gay marriage. People forget under George Bush in the early 2000s, gay marriage was the end of life as we know it. Mm-hmm. If the gays were allowed to get married, it was going to end marriage for everyone else. No one else's marriage was going to be, this 20 years ago, right? So that's the only thing, the only hope, I guess, is that in the long run, the correct side wins. I read somebody posted that throughout history, the people who burn the books have never been right.
Yeah, right.
Not once have they been like, boy, I'm glad we banned those books. Like, no. So that's the hope. But going through it day to day, you look at Gen Z, and yeah, they're soft in a lot of ways.
Oh, I love them.
They've also put up with some hell that, like, their first 20 years on Earth, man. Hi, we're going to have a nice housing recession. Then we're going to hit you with a pandemic. And then we're going to have a mass epidemic of stupidity. Oh, did we mention we're bringing back measles with hopes of polio? Mm-hmm. Have fun.
Yeah, I mean, I love Gen Z. I mean, I think every generation it's like there's yins and yangs, right? Like there's some really, like, I think there's some great things about the boomers and some not so great things about the boomers. Same with Gen X. Same with I'm a millennial. But Gen Z, I think that overall they are pretty freaking badass.
Well, and I like their ability to talk shit. They definitely talk a lot of shit. But now the other thing, you have to factor in the race factor, right? Which I say like right now, people are like, oh my God, Donald Trump, as far as black people are concerned, like, oh really? You got a crazy white man in charge. Yeah. Wonder if we'll make it. Wonder if we'll survive. Crazy white man. Yeah. Never saw that before. Oh, you're out of work. Well, imagine that. Having trouble finding a job, are you? Not sure how that feels. So, I mean, unfortunately, this has always been the two Americas, right? And
Sure.
it's just different. My mother, who was the funniest person I've ever known, and who, without a doubt, I got my sense of humor from, she, very pragmatic. She was from the South and just told it like it was. And I remember one time talking about women's liberation. This is in the 80s, right? When the women's lib movement. Women's lib. You mean white women's lib? When do you ever see a black woman fighting to go to work? I'm fighting to not go to work. Ain't nobody ever stopped me from going to work, But it's true, right? It's two different realities, and that unfortunately, and I say unfortunately because, like I said, when it comes to joking about social issues, Richard Pryor's racism jokes from the 70s still apply today. That's sad. That's sad that those jokes are just as funny today. Anything Dick Gregory said in the 60s is still true today, maybe even more so. That's what's sad. People are playing George Carlin clips every day, and he's exactly right. And these are clips from Carlin in the 80s, right? Maybe the 90s. It's like, wow, 30 to 40 years, we've progressed. Not at all.
That is like kind of a bitter pill to swallow, I think, for all of us. I mean, I heard it was actually Lewis Black who said it, and he said it during one of his specials where he goes, hey, for those of you who, have a problem with my point of view and the things I have to say, you should feel good because guess what? And as long as I've been doing what I do, the world's gotten worse.
Yeah. Yeah. It in some ways it's better, maybe because it's not as obvious, right? Like Chris Rock had a bit, about if a black person from the 1920s was around today, they'd be like, wow, you guys got it good, So it hasn't got to that extreme yet. But when I look at the Latino people, when I started doing comedy early in my career, this was back. It started with Reagan, but it was more Bush, the first Bush, where they had these things about sending Latinos back. And, I lived in California and they were like, well, send them back to Mexico. And I used to joke with Latino comics. I was like, yeah, they hate us, but they're trying to get rid of you. And now here we are 30 years later and the exact same thing is going on. And it's comical and sad at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, immigration is always an easy scapegoat. That's always just been the easiest scapegoat for the powerful to, weaponize and use and use it to oppress people, because you can always, and you mentioned the media. You could always use the media to be like, oh, this is why your life isn't great. It's because of these people, and people still buy it. Like people
yeah, well, there's so much funny about that. But the funniest thing is every one of these people who hates immigration, like, really, what language did your grandfather speak? Mm-hmm. What language did your great grandfather? Not one of you had, when your family came to the United States, they didn't come in speaking English with a full-time job, and my dad was an immigrant. My dad was from Honduras. And he came into New York in the 1930s. He became a citizen in 1939. So he went through this. That was a time when you came to the United States, if you were white, your name had 16 vowels in it. They couldn't read your name. So they're like, your name's Smith. Go down the line. Your name is Jones, right? And they just became Americans. So they act like we've been here all the time. And no, every immigrant group was at the bottom of the rung. And again, black people's slavery, completely different history. But every other immigrant group that came in, start at the bottom. You did manual labor. You didn't speak English. Your kids learned to speak English. Your kids went to school, public school, by the way. No school vouchers. Yeah, public school. That's where your kids went. And they learned, and, you moved up generationally. And now you think somehow, you're telling people to go back. And I always tell the Latinos their only mistake, 100 years late. 100 years, they say, oh, Latinos are bringing crime. Really? Was that The Godfather you just watched? The Mafia movie? That was a great movie, wasn't it? Yeah. Shame those Latinos are bringing crime to the United States. Wonder if anyone else did that. And you're laughing because, it's that simple and that ridiculous, and they just deny it. And nobody in the press points that out like, well, wait a minute. Yeah, we do have the, what do they call MS-13, MS-14, whatever. MS-14 really reminds me of the Gambinos.
Yeah, which, by the way, all that stuff is still around to some degree.
Yeah, I know.
It's just like, oh yeah, there's some Latinos have gangs. You mean like every other group of people? Right. Like some groups of people have people who are gang members.
You know who they don't mess with? You know what they don't mess with? The Chinese and the Japanese. You ever notice that? They don't mention the triads? They don't mention the Yakuza. You know why? Because they don't mess around, right? When you get all that stuff about you better speak English, nobody goes to Chinatown telling them they better speak English. You know why? Because they'll take you down one of those little side streets and you'll never be heard from again. Chinatown is the most closed gangster thing, right? In any city, you go to Chinatown, Ron. You walk down that main street, there's Chinese restaurants, there's stuff like that, right?
It's amazing.
But those side streets where there's animals hanging in the window and you're really not sure what they are, what they're eating, and they all speak a language you've never heard, and the signs are in Chinese, nobody has anything to say because you mess around with them, you were just, what happened to Ron? Oh, Ron never here. Who Ron? Never was here. We don't know Ron. You're gone.
And I love those neighborhoods so much, man. I mean, I still like the first time I ever went to Chinatown in San Francisco. I was in my early 20s. It was my first time in San Francisco. And yeah, I just wandered into this place. Nobody spoke a lick of English. They just they handed me a menu. I pointed to what I wanted. They handed me a picture. On one side was a Coca-Cola. The other side was a beer. They told me to point to one of them. I did. And I know I'm about to have one of the best meals I've ever had in my life. And of course I did.
Fantastic.
Awesome. Yeah.
And again, it's a culture. I joke about it with no disrespect, but
of course,
the irony is all this hatred toward the Latino culture with the Chinatown is right there. And the signs, the street, everything's written in Chinese and nobody's complaining. Nobody has a problem with it. They live their life, but and people in Washington, D.C., some of these politicians will be in a Mexican restaurant complaining about Latin immigrants. It's a willful ignorance and blindness. So from the comedian's point of view, it's an endless source of material. And at the same time, I wish it would end.
Well, it's wild, man. Like just going on this topic, when Trump was talking about the whole birthright thing, that was for just morally repulsive on so many levels. But what he was talking about, that would involve changing the Constitution if he really wanted to just end birthright citizenship. And if there were that change to the Constitution, even though he was all, this won't apply retroactively or whatever else. I mean, look, I have done some research on my family's history in Italy, because there's some laws regarding citizenship. So, I mean, I could tell you myself, and I think a ton of Americans, if that Constitution were to change, technically none of us are here legally.
Right. Well,
the line would have been cut off at some point because most people were having kids before they were naturalized.
The Constitution wouldn't change, and it doesn't have to because none of them read it. And this is where the Supreme Court, honestly, they should be embarrassed at how bad a job they're doing. There's no shame anymore, but they should be embarrassed because you know what? The president isn't the king. The president doesn't just say, I'm going to end birthright citizenship. It's like, no, you're not. You can't. There's a constitution. There's a document. You're always quoting the founding fathers. They wrote a document to prevent your, crazy power. I don't understand how this Doge thing works. The way I learned it, okay, now I just watch Schoolhouse Rock like everybody else, But the way I learned it, the president can't just make up a department and give it unlimited power. Like, what are you,
and have an unelected dude in charge of it.
Exactly. Who is an immigrant? And who is an immigrant, But and then the other funny thing about these guys hating immigrants, all of their wives are immigrants. It's like, I hate all immigrants except the hot one that I'm banging. What? It's the hypocrisy. Like, there's so much. Congress, Supreme Court are so complicit that they don't even have to work on the hypocrisy. They don't even attempt to hide it. It's just there because they're like, yeah, we can just do this. No one's going to stop us. And the people who are supposed to stop it, I say, once again, it's the press. I tell people again, Ron, I'm a bit older than you. Okay. I can remember there was a time, Ron, if 60 Minutes knocked on your door, I mean, literally, they would have a camera in the back alley and show you running. People would physically run from 60 Minutes because they knew, I'm caught. Now 60 Minutes is like, hi, you're a criminal and a liar. Have a seat. Let's talk about your new book.
Yeah, it's all access journalism now across the board. It's a shame. What do you think, like, kind of big picture? Like, what do you think the fix is for all this?
I don't know, because I don't know who's going to be the person. I said it during the last election cycle. What America needs that we haven't found is a white Barack Obama. If Barack Obama had been white, they'd be carving his, face into Mount Rushmore. You know what I mean? Like, he was the embodiment of everything, quote, American. He worked his way up, went to law school, learned the Constitution, right? Just became a president, turned around, saved the U.S. auto industry. Just that one thing would have made him legendary. Tried to get health care for millions of people who were too dumb to know they needed it, and he gave hope. He was a face. Young people related to him. He listened to the music that they listened to. Fantastic wife and children. No scandals, no hint of scandal, nothing. But his crime, he was black. If he was white, if there was a white Barack Obama, that would be the person who could galvanize America and move it forward. And I just haven't seen that leader. America's not going to vote for a woman. That's been proven. America's not going to vote for a minority again because they're out to get you. Pete Buttigieg is, and forgive me because I always pronounce his name wrong, but he's.
No, I think it's Buttigieg.
Buttigieg,
yeah.
Brilliant man, great. Stands up to Fox News on Fox News. But he's gay, which means he's out to get your children. Yeah, I think that's what they're doing now. Are they out to get your children? Something like that. I'm not sure what the gays are.
I think they're targeting the transgender community.
Yeah, some nonsense. But he would never be elected. He would never be elected for that reason. So that's what we need. There's no leader. There's no one for people to get behind, and most people need a leader. They're not going to figure it out themselves.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree with that in theme. I know that, our enthusiasms for electoral politics is a bit different. You and I have talked about that before. And I had some pretty big disappointments I was so excited when Obama got elected. And then, as the 8 years went by, and of course, not all of that is on him. He had a, Congress who fought him tooth and nail. He had, a lot of circumstantial things, but there were still some executive orders that I really wish would have happened that could have and didn't. There was a lot of foreign policy things that, disappointed me greatly. But I do agree that it's like we need a true leader. I just think that leader is going to be outside of the electoral system completely. Like I look around.
And the system is hard to beat. That's the thing with
that is true.
Outside
that is system. True.
Because, and don't get me wrong, Barack Obama was by no means perfect. And to me, his biggest failure was allowing that Supreme Court, to not even nominate his candidate for the Supreme Court. That was
a
Mitch
big one.
McConnell's thing, and that was a fight that I wish Barack Obama had fought, to the point that I wish he had said, "No, I'm shutting down the government until we do this because it's in the Constitution." But so I'm not sitting here saying he's perfect, but he did a hell of a job, especially like you said, with the Congress fighting against him every step. But the way the system is, and this is why I think the system won't change, because if a Republican ever won the popular vote and lost the electoral vote, the Republicans would do away with the Electoral College in a week. The problem is no Republican's ever going to win the popular vote, and it's just not going to happen. So they keep the electoral system in place because it works for them. Obviously, California and New York, Wisconsin is a swing state, Pennsylvania, even Michigan, it's not even close as to who contributes to the country and who should have more say-so in running the country. Obviously, and here's what's really funny. The billionaires who say, well, we have all the money, so we run everything, fight against the states that have all the money and should probably be running things. California would be a very successful country.
Yeah. Oh, I think the thought has gone through all of our minds, especially as of recent.
Would be a bit. The only thing California doesn't have is a military. Otherwise,
I thought you were going to say water. I was like, yes, we got to figure out that water part.
No,
but other people have done
water. Listen, that 2 billion gallon stunt that Trump pulled, all that water went to waste because all the farmers, the people who know what they're doing with water, said we can't use that water. It's too much. You literally would have flooded the crops. No, see. Because they think, and this is another thing. When did America start celebrating stupidity? When did people just decide?
It's always been the case as long as I've been alive. I don't know.
Yeah, it probably has. And that's true. In your lifetime, I was actually born in the 60s, right? So I was a kid when we were going to the moon. And by the way, Ron, we did go to the moon. It wasn't just a movie. But but there was a time when that was literally being a rocket scientist was the most amazing thing. And then, and I have friends who are scientists and I have friends who are doctors. And particularly my friend she's a scientist for the Red Cross. And so she's studying blood and viruses and antigens. This is what and I'm like, wow, to think all of your education and experience has been nullified by the internet. These idiots think that they know more than you. You've devoted your entire life to studying things that we can't pronounce. And because I went on a website, you know what I mean?
No, I do.
I have a friend. I don't know if you may have heard of him if you like jazz at all. You ever hear of a guy named David Sanborn?
I feel like I've heard that name.
So David Sanborn, one of the greatest, he just, sadly, he died last year. He's one of the greatest saxophone players to have ever lived. Just an amazing life, discography, career, however you want to put it. From the 60s, this guy went to Woodstock,
nice.
And he was in the Tonight Show band. Saturday Night Live band. He's won multiple Grammys, just the most brilliant saxophone player you can imagine. So this is his story. When he was a kid, he had polio and he was put in an iron lung. And the doctors told his mother, playing a wind instrument will help develop his lungs so he can breathe better. Becomes one of the greatest saxophone players to ever live. Talk to him about anti-vaxxing. Talk to a kid who had polio and was around when the polio vaccine, people don't understand these anti-vax idiots. The polio vaccine, there were lines for miles. People's kids were dying. You understand? That's how, and we've gone from that to this idiot saying, well, it's only measles. We eradicated measles. Measles didn't exist. Now it's killing people again. And this is the kind of stupidity that you can't, how do you battle that? When you have vaccines and doctors and scientists and years and years and years of experience, real world experience, and somebody just says, nah, vaccines are fake. No, vaccines cause autism. One of the brilliant things about the right wing craziness, right, is they make arguments so stupid you can't argue with them. Because there's a certain point where if someone makes up some logic, there's nothing you could do to argue with it. And they do that all the time. And when you're having a quote debate with them, they just change the topic. I don't know if you've noticed, Ron, but apparently the cats and dogs of Ohio seem to be okay. What about your foreign policy? What's your healthcare plan? They're eating the cats and dogs. And how do you argue with that?
Oh man. I mean, yeah, dude, that's a lot of ground. And honestly, I don't even want to respond too much because I don't want to like completely derail this interview. But when I look at someone like RFK, I can't. I mean, I forget who said it, but somebody said it when the whole confirmation was going on for him. And they said, no matter what happens next, the fact that he got to this point is a true societal failure beyond comprehension. That man
Really?
is, I think so. That guy's a eugenicist.
No. You think that's amazing? Because I don't know if you've looked at who's running the Department of Education.
No. I got you. I got you.
There is not
one thing at a time, Alonzo.
Not one cabinet position is filled by a person with any experience in that area. That's what's amazing. They like you know how hard you'd have to try, like any cabinet position, Homeland Security. Well, let's give it to the governor of South Dakota because, she's obviously traveled the world and knows what security is. Like, every cabinet position is filled by a person with no clue what they should be doing, zero experience. It's borderline fascinating.
Man, it is just something. I mean, it is just something. I mean, I hear things. I mean, you talk about like your parents, seeing what's been unraveled with civil rights and stuff. I mean, the day a straight up eugenicist became in charge of health, and the day, like you hear all these sig howls and stuff like that. I mean, I have like a group text with my family, and I was just like, so when Grandpa was alive, he never walked right in as long as I knew him. And the reason he never walked right was because he got wounded. And he got wounded fighting these people. Mm-hmm. That's what he was doing. He was fighting these. He wasn't necessarily even fighting for the United States, quote unquote. He was fighting fascism. He was fighting Nazis. And here we are. Like it's just.
Yeah, it's mind-boggling. And the other thing they're masters of, right, is misdirection. Because while they're sitting out here talking about, the 10 transgender athletes or plastic versus paper straws, they're doing away with all protection of the national park. So this new bill that you have to have, I forget what the bill is, but basically you have to have your name on your birth certificate to vote, which would eliminate the vote of all married women who took on their husband's name. Now, I don't even know if you're aware of that. I wasn't aware of it. A woman who I know who works in abortion rights, et cetera, women's rights, sent me this article about it. And this is the kind of thing. So while you're looking over here at this nonsense, this is the horrible thing they're doing. And if this bill were to pass, married women couldn't vote because your legal name would not match your birth certificate.
Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's just how
that's the subtlety of what they're doing. And when I say they, it's not some weird underground conspiracy. No, the Republican Party is pushing this. The women in the Republican Party are borderline fascinating because it's like I'm volunteering. Like I hate you, whether you be gay, black, Latino, transgender, whatever group we hate this week. I hate you so much, I'm willing to give up my rights to take yours. That's crazy.
It's wild, man.
Boy, this is a great comedy interview, Ron. I don't see why I don't talk to you more often.
Yeah, I kind of, as I was playing this, I was like, we're definitely, I want to learn more about Alonzo, but I know we're going to veer off into political talk. How can we not with everything that's going on in the world?
Shut
So
it
this
down.
was,
Ask me something else. We've covered that. We know where we stand.
we covered it. We covered it. We covered it. Well, what's coming up for you?
That's great you asked. So, moving to Vegas from LA,
Yeah,
I don't do
what's
the
the,
I don't do the local stuff like I used to, the Laugh Factory, the Improv, the weekly stuff. So I'm more working. What I'm working on now is my friend Chris Titus. I don't know if you know Titus.
yeah, I know Titus. I mean,
Great
not super
comic,
well, but I've met him. Like,
super smart guy. He said to me, he challenged me. He said, do 5 minutes that scares you. So I have been working on a bit about my personal life, why I've never been married, my drug use and recovery, how I started in comedy, the people who started me in comedy. You know, the springboard for it was a place called Studio 12, recovery, where I went to rehab. And the stars went to Betty Ford. The crew went to Studio 12. I went to rehab with the grips and the electricians and the makeup artists and the wardrobe people. And they were the ones who made entertainment real for me. Up until then, I would have never dreamed of going into entertainment business. And suddenly I was around people who were not only in the business, but who explained like, yeah, this is what we do. And they were creative and they were fun and they were funny and they loved their jobs. Something I had never considered loving my job. I didn't know that existed. And, and they were a big part of supporting me and trying stand up and trying something completely different than anything I'd ever done. So I'm talking about that more. So I am doing more personal stuff in my act and I'm liking it. It's growing. The bit is growing. The story is growing. That's what I'm working on. I will do another special this year. I'm going to do one of those self-produced comedy club specials released on YouTube. I have a friend who helps me with social media because beyond simple posting, I'm lost, and she's really good at it. Social media is funny because anyone can say they're good at social media. She's the third or fourth person I've had help me with this, but she really knows what she's doing. A lot of people, it's like, oh, so you one click ahead of me. Why am I paying you? No, she's really good. And she said, we need to get the material you're doing out. We need to get it out there so you can move on and, but it's still, I don't know, preserved or out there. So that's going to be one of the projects for this year. One of the projects is to record a club special, just doing this topical material because it changes so fast. I need to get it out there and talk about it. And then working on the personal material, which is more the long range project.
What spawned the move to Vegas?
I spent some time. I've always loved the desert.
Okay.
I dare say spiritually, I feel better in the desert. Growing up in New York, the first time I drove from LA to Vegas, I had no idea there was this much nothing in the world. Like there's a beauty to it for me that the desert's been the same for millions of years, or 6,000 years if you go to the Creation Museum in Kentucky, one or the other. And the idea that it's quiet, it's empty, I like that. I had been looking in Arizona, Scottsdale area, because I briefly had a place there before and I liked it. And I never thought of Vegas. And then I spent a week here in an Airbnb doing a gig. And I was like, wow, this is kind of nice. And I came back a few times and I looked around, looked at different homes and, the cost of living was less and I don't need to be in LA, right? The pandemic was a big change because that was the first time in 25 years I was home and it was quiet and I liked it. And I was like, okay, I'm not chasing it as much as I used to. I like this being home. I like this being quiet. And this is a good place for it. So it's more relaxed than LA. I'm not far from LA. I can still get to LA. It's a 4-hour drive, 5-hour drive to do things and do some gigs and stuff like that. But yeah, it's the peace of living here. And the interesting thing with the weather, everyone talks about the heat. No, man, it's the cold that killed me. It get down in the 20s. here. This desert cold is
desert
ridiculous.
nights, yeah.
So yeah, I love it though. I'm having a good time. My dog, who's somewhere sleeping, I got a Great Dane. That was another big change in my life. Phenomenal.
Nice.
If you get a dog, they make you better people.
I have a cat. She's 18, and she has my heart. But I love dogs too. I just Lucy found me many years ago.
Human,
absolutely. Well, where can people go to find your tour dates, to find everything?
You're nice enough to have it on the screen. AlonzoBodden.com is the center of everything. So funny on Instagram. I like Instagram, but you can go to all my social media stuff. You can get my schedule. Everything is on the main website. Or if you go to ZoFunny, that because people don't even bother with websites anymore. You'll see me on Instagram, on Threads. I do not post on X or Twitter. My social media person posts dates there. I can't, and that's turned into a sewer.
It's gotten rough. Yeah.
It's like, let's see what he did with Twitter. Oh yeah, we should give him the government. He did such a great job. Again, it's how do you argue with people who deny the evidence right in front of them?
It's tough. It's tough. It's really tough. Well, Alonzo, thanks for doing this.
It was fun, Ron. It was fun catching up with you. I know we got into the topical stuff, but you can't not. And that's one of the things I catch myself a lot of times saying, "Oh, stop. Trump's hijacking our conversation. Let's not let him do this," because it happens so often. So yeah, it happened again, but I think we had a great time. I had a great time. So I hope your people like what I had to say. And even if they didn't, go ahead and hate me, because, it's been a dream to be canceled for some time. Have you ever seen how much money Dave Chappelle makes every time he gets canceled? Just saying.
That was Alonzo Bodden. Check out all of his stuff. Love talking to that guy. I really, really do. We have, there's some areas where we see things differently, but overall, I really love where he's coming from, and I love talking to him. And he's a phenomenal comic. Music for the 1000 Podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Bay Watching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Be sure to leave us a 5-star review, would you? This is still a very, very new show. Every 5-star review helps. And here's something interesting. I am going to be unveiling a new product very, very soon that is a workshop, and that workshop is going to be available for all patrons, and it's included as part of your patronage. So it's something I'm going to be unrolling to the public at large, but patrons get an insider delivery of it. So if you're ever thinking about becoming a patron, now is a very, very good time. And you can find all that information at patreon.com/RonFlacone. My Patreon is a give what you can Patreon. So it can be as low as $1 a month or a single unit of your currency. Because for me, it's all about building community. That's what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to build a community around this show, around the other creative endeavors. And that's, at the end of the day, what I'm trying to do. Sadly, capitalism has made it so that I do need to survive just like everybody else. But I'm trying to do that in a way that is feasible for everybody involved. You get it. All right. So we're almost at 80. This is 79. We are almost at 80. We're almost to the 1980s decade. That's how I measure this stuff. I measure it through the lens of music decades. And soon I won't really be able to do that. Or I could, but it'll just be weird. So I'll be like, so we're in the mid-aughts now, even though we're just over 100. So I'll probably stop doing that after we reach 90. But soon we're entering 1980. So there'll be a lot of comparisons that involve The Cure. So we can all look forward to that. Catch you next week. Peace. Hey guys, Ron Flacone here. Take your own 1,000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1,000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.